everyone, and welcome to Survive This Crit, a podcast where we combine our love for horror movies and RPGs so that we can take a chance to analyze those horror movies and decide whether or not we can survive for ourselves. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nick, and with me today is my co-host, Kylie. Kylie, how are you doing?
I am doing good. I am embracing the new year that is 2025. But more importantly, what was I watching 2 months ago when we recorded this back in November? I have been finding some good shows. I've been watching shows as they come out recently, which is actually kind of new for me because I didn't experience a whole lot of the cable era. Because as OG listeners know, I didn't grow up with TV. So I have been watching The Golden Bachelorette and Abbott Elementary
Ooh.
as they've been coming out. Those are my I'm watching reality TV, but I love seeing these sweet older men fall head over heels with Joan and try to woo her the best they can. And all these men have such a cool camaraderie with each other. It's been
I
really
was
fun
gonna
to
say,
watch.
no judgment here on watching The Golden Bachelorette. It seems like, at least from
Mhm.
my understanding, I haven't watched it, but it's supposed to be more wholesome, so no judgment on that.
I think I've
Um,
tried to encourage you to watch it because I think you would like it. There was a whole multiple scenes about two guys who are like chefs and they're kind of going at it about their cooking styles with each other, and it's just these like two grandpas who are having to stay in the bachelor mansion together, and it's so
I
sweet.
don't know.
Um,
I've never been a fan of like reality TV. Honestly, I mean, maybe the best I've come close to is Great British Baking Show. It's all a little repetitive for me.
mm. No, it's okay. No, I understand what you're saying, but I also am very similar to you where I don't watch reality TV. So I'm saying just give it a try because for me it's
Mm.
been a very different flavor of because I don't watch reality TV ever. I don't watch anything else. This is my only reality TV I watch. So that I consistently watch. But yes, Abbott Elementary, I like it a lot. It has a very similar energy to The Office in a lot of ways, but the writing is so smart and funny, and I find myself laughing out loud like at
Oh
least
yeah,
once per
same way. I
episode.
love Abbott. I was just watching one episode this week where what was it? Gregory, Gregory, has to fight a dad. Oh my
Hmm.
gosh, I was like,
Love Gregory. Yeah, I saw that episode this week. It was so good. It was such a good episode, and it's very wholesome too. It's not too crazy.
I,
It's like it's a good balance. But Nick, what have you
pretty
been
much the
watching?
same thing almost. I mean, mostly Abbott Elementary, trying to finish up the last season of What We Do in the Shadows. Been taking that a little bit at a time. And
Mm.
then just trying to watch some Christmas movies here and there. I know it's a little early, although by the time this gets out, I guess it won't be that early anymore. Yeah, it'll be late.
You'll be late.
Um, yeah, nothing too specific that I'm watching. I guess the specific thing would just be Abbott Elementary, like what you're talking about.
Hmm. I love that for once we've actually aligned on the same like show that we're watching, which is cool.
Ooh.
So double recommendation to check out Abbott Elementary if you haven't watched it because it's a really fun show and I hope it's here for many more
Eh,
years to come. But importantly, we have a film that we're doing for this series. And no, it's not Disney's Frozen, don't worry, you didn't get confused, or some indie remake of two sisters, one with ice powers. It's
although
not that. It is something
although one of the
entirely
actors in this movie
different.
once had ice powers, but we'll talk more on that.
Yeah, stay tuned for that. We are doing Frozen, the 2010 thriller slash horror film. Nick, do you have a summary on that film?
Okay, so real simple summary here, people. Three friends in college, Parker, Dan, and Joe, go on a ski trip for the weekend. And trying to squeeze in one more run before the ski lift closes, a series of unexpected circumstances leaves them trapped halfway up the lift. Now they must figure out how they're going to survive against the harsh weather while they wait for someone to rescue them.
Dun dun dun. Okay, so for everybody who is dying to know, an introduction to the film Frozen 2010, not Disney's Frozen. The film was shown to Sundance initially January 10th, 2010. And then theatrically, it was released February 5th, 2010. This film for Sundance sold out every day, and audiences were literally having visceral reactions. They were throwing up, they were passing out, they were leaving the theater early because they couldn't handle what was going on.
Who was having these reactions? I'm
Interestingly,
sorry. What?
the audience
okay.
at Sundance. So, like critics, celebrities, audience members who are coming to appreciate film at the film festival, and journalists, like those were the people who were having visceral reactions to this movie. So the budget for this film, I actually couldn't find a clear budget for this film, which is really interesting. It's the first one that I've not been able to find clear numbers on. But the gross for this film, opening weekend, it only made $131,000 domestically overall. Only 106 theaters released it. It was a small release compared to a lot of the big blockbuster films. It made only $230,000 domestically, but it made 2.4 internationally. And it made a total of $2.7 million. So it was clearly a much more popular film internationally than it was in the States. It just seemed like it never had picked up enough ground or enough hype about it, even though it sold out at Sundance, which should have been a big deal. The film was made and distributed by Peter Block, who started A Bigger Boat Productions. He's a former Lionsgate executive who picked up the film. A couple examples of A Bigger Boat Productions include Jigsaw, the 2017 film, House at the End of the Street from 2012, and a couple of others. The film was written and directed by Adam Green, known for the Hatchet franchise, but we've got a little bit more on him later. Awards and nominations for this film: being nominated for a ton of Fright Meter awards, but won for Best Director and Best Actor for Kevin Zager's role. Also was nominated for Best Horror Film at the Saturn Awards. So, Nick, I've come to your favorite part of guessing how much people liked this movie versus critics. So, for the tomato meter, for the critic score, what do you think people thought of this film?
So this one's going to be a little tricky because I personally like the film, and based on what you said, it sounds like people like the film, but it just somehow wasn't good. So it's either the critic's fault or the audience's fault. So I'm gonna say, that the critics really liked the film. So I'm gonna say that the critics gave it an 80%.
Wow. Okay. The tomato meter score was 63. So, okay, now recalibrate, reanalyze, let that frostbite thaw, and then
audience score.
Now go for the audience score.
So the critics hated the movie. So the audience must have loved it. There we go. It's all making sense now. It's all coming together. I'm Charlie Day. Exactly. I'm Charlie Day with that
clicking, right?
little red strings. You know the one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Suddenly it's all making sense. I'm going to say that the audience score, not going to say 80%. I'm going to say 77%.
Wow. Okay. Brace yourself. You maybe have never been more wrong. The audience score for this movie was 48%.
Oh my goodness. Kylie, I blame you. You deceived me. Your little reassurances are giving...
I just calmly...
Your little reassurances. How dare you? How dare you reassure me?
I'm not supposed to reassure you. I will say, though, an interesting note that some of the critics have, they said that they loved the movie, but the movie was ruined for them because of the CGI wolves, which was not even true because they used real wolves for the entire filming of this movie.
I don't know. There was no CGI at all in this film. Like,
there was no CGI in this movie. Yeah, well, bleep me there, because it's worth saying that with, like, it was very impressive that they used no CGI in
Yep,
the entire
everything
making of this
100%
movie.
practical.
I love it. Letterboxd. How do you think our fancy, fine-nosed film friends? What do you think they think about the movie?
Um, this one's gotta have the high one. I just know someone out there likes this movie besides us. So I'm gonna say
Okay, go
4
ahead.
stars on Letterboxd.
It got a 2.7 out of
I'm done.
5.
I'm out of here.
Breaking news, Nick has quit the podcast because not enough people have seen this
I am
movie and
just
he's personally
a
offended.
little too much. Probably shouldn't be, but oh my god.
Well, I was surprised by it too. So some of the reviews, Haley gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and she said Parker crying over her puppy is more emotional than her crying
Oh no.
over her boyfriend. Facts. I actually did tear up during that part. That was the part that made me
I
probably the most stressed when she was like,
I did not. Yes, that was definitely sad to think about. But in my mind, I was like, you know what, the dog's gonna be fine. Let's focus on you guys right now. You're the ones that are freezing out here right now. Let's figure this out.
yeah. Ty said, movie ain't the best, but the situation was so nerve wracking, I was stressed, which I related to a lot. Alutaz said they gave it a 3 out of 5. They said, close your jackets, you idiots.
That's fair. I didn't even notice
So
that. Were their jackets like a little unzipped?
I will say, yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, so a lot of the negative feedback of this movie was about the unrealistic nature of the survival abilities
Okay.
of our main characters. Like these characters had zero survival sensibility according to a lot of the people who reviewed this movie, myself included, but we'll get
Mm.
into that
Yeah.
in a
I
minute.
personally, yes, I did think like there were some choices, and like you said, we'll get into it for a minute. That were definitely like, what? Why would you do that? Why? Come on, think a little bit. But we'll talk more about it later.
Use your brain.
Anyway,
Well, I think it's time for monster movie trivia.
well, actually,
If
since
you
there's
want
no
to
monster in
introduce
this
that.
film, I thought we might call it what is it? Frozen trivia.
Frozen. Okay, so am I just gonna freeze like little by
Yes, Kylie, I
little if
want
I
you to
get
go
these
to your
wrong?
thermostat. I want you to decrease the temperature on it 10 degrees every time you get a question wrong.
You know what? That'd be kind of great. I'm not gonna lie, except for the fact it would probably break our AC unit, but I actually like it kind of
Oh, that makes
cold
sense.
all the time.
With your cold heart.
My cold heart and my no soul. Yeah, I really like being in the cold
Okay.
most of the
So,
time.
for fans who haven't or are not familiar with this segment, really quick, we're going to go ahead and go through 10 quick trivia questions here that will test whether or not Kylie actually paid attention during the film. And she gets 3 chances to get questions wrong. After the 3rd chance, that's it. She's done. But obviously, we'll be finishing up and going through the questions for all you lovely listeners. That way you have a chance to test your own knowledge of film. All right. Kylie, are you ready?
All right, I am ready. Kill
Okay.
me gently,
Gently it
please.
is. So here's a classic question here. Where was the movie filmed?
Okay, it was filmed in Utah. Do you need me to be more
I will
specific than
give it
that?
to you, but let's see if you actually know where in Utah. Just for the heck of it. I'll give you the question anyways. You got it right.
The Snow
Okay,
Basin
yeah, that's not
Resort.
what I was talking about, but you are correct, and it's more impressive. I was more talking about.
Huntsville, Utah. I
No,
have
no,
it
no,
in
no, no,
my
no, no, no,
notes
no.
too.
Not Huntsville.
But
No, it's Ogden, Utah.
okay. Well, I stick with my
Yes,
previous answer, Snow Basin Mountain. I
don't worry,
apparently
don't worry.
wrote
It's
the wrong city
understandable.
down.
But yeah, you got this question right. Second question: what are the names of our main characters?
Gosh. Dan,
Okay, good.
Joe, and Parker.
Now we get to a little bit more tricky here. Where does the film take place? The actual
Okay.
location of the, not like where it was filmed. You know what I mean? The setting of the film.
Yeah. Yeah. Where they were like the film, the imaginary land that we're living in. Oh gosh. It starts with an H. Holliston.
Okay.
Holliston Mountain.
I will give it to you because that is correct. I was looking for the state. I was just going to give you the state, Vermont. But anyway, you know what? You seem to
Oh, well,
you
I
seem to be
wouldn't
coming in
have
a
known
lot
the
more prepared
state,
than me on
so.
my own answers. Very impressive.
Yeah, I'm finding the other right
Okay,
answers.
this one definitely not ambiguous. Ready? How much money does Parker pay the chairlift
Okay.
attendant so that they can get off? Yes,
100? Was
it
it
was
50?
100.
No, it
They
was
had
100.
they had two $50 bills, and Dan, who got mad because he was like, "What? You couldn't go for any numbers in between, like 51, 75?"
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yep.
This mine's like a steel trap. And the fact that it's not. It really is not. But
Okay,
I'm surprising myself. Apparently, I
I
paid a
know.
lot more attention than
Maybe
I
you
thought I
like this
did.
movie a lot more than me. Okay.
Maybe.
In what grade did the characters Dan and Joe meet? Yes, they had that little
Kindergarten?
story. He had that little story near the end where he's talking about the first time they met. And it was kindergarten. You're doing great. You're doing great.
Yeah, and then he got ripped apart by wolves.
Well, thank you for
Spoiler.
saying spoiler after you said the spoiler. Very cool.
I mean, if anyone listens to our show, they know that we're talking about the plot of the movie, so they probably should watch the movie before they listen to us talk about
Fair
the
enough.
plot of the movie.
If you haven't watched the movie yet, you probably should
I
take a
don't know.
pause on this podcast real quick. Okay.
And then
Okay.
come back and join us.
What method of dying does Dan describe as the worst way to die?
Was
No.
it burning? No, Dan? Dan is. No. Shit.
Shark
No,
attack.
I don't know.
Specifically, if you see the fin coming.
Oh. Duh.
Here we go.
Okay, I take a
No.
slash.
Unfortunately, this isn't slashing.
Slash
This is you
me.
freeze slowly. You got frostbite, Kylie.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's so cold.
Okay. Question number 7. How high up are the characters when they're trapped on the ski lift? Ooh.
50 feet. Technically 47 when they were filming.
Okay. Very good. Number 8. What does Joe not like about Lucky Charm?
Gosh. Is it the little marshmallows get all soggy? Or there's only 1 or 2 in the package?
No, it's very close to that, but that wasn't his explicit complaint. It was purple horseshoes as marshmallows. He had a whole problem with the concept of it for whatever reason.
That infuriates me. Good thing he got. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Okay, I'll take more frostbite.
Here you go, more frostbite
please.
coming your way. There's a chill, isn't there?
Ooh, I'm so cold. There's a
Okay,
chill
one
in
more and
there.
you're frozen to death.
Oh shit.
Okay. Question number 9. Who rescues Parker at the end of the movie?
The person's name? It's a stranger who drives up in their car, and then he picks her up.
I'll give you that one because that's what I put down too. It's meant to be more of like a trick question to see if you know.
Yeah. Oh, so you wanted me to like drop a name? Oh, Richard, the stranger.
Definitely, he was the most important top bill cast member.
It's not Richard.
For that 5 seconds on camera.
Well, apparently if Patrick Dempsey is playing him, then he can be.
True.
So.
Was that Patrick Dempsey? Oh wait, no. This is a reference.
No, I was like, wait a second.
Okay, last question. Is it Kylie?
No.
How does Parker get off the ski lift?
Does that make or break? The ski lift over time becomes looser, and then she considers jumping off, but then it falls. The chair falls off, and thankfully the cable catches her when she's about 5 feet from the ground, and she goes off with the chair. The chair comes off, basically. Yes,
that was a long-winded answer, but it was a one that was necessary for this question, and you got it right.
I wasn't sure how long-winded you wanted me to be, so I just wanted to make sure I got all the facts out there. Since I've been writing the RPG for this one, I've been like thinking about everything a little bit more detailed.
Don't worry, that was purposely designed to be like one of those questions you get in school on the test where you have to write like, oh, give a free write paragraph answer about with this question here. So you followed the assignment. You understood. Congratulations, Kylie.
Hey,
You
so did I
won.
win? I won
Congratulations. You did not freeze to death today.
monster movie trivia. It's been so long since either one of us have won. I don't actually remember the
Neither
last
do I. I
time
feel
one
like
of
we
us
keep trying to
won.
stump ourselves, and this time I was like, you know what? Let's just focus on what happened in the film.
You know, that was a good call. So now that I won, Nick, you're saying that as a loser who did not win. Um, Nick, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions, the deepest, frostiest bits of your soul. Tell
Okay.
me what you thought about
So
this movie.
honestly, going into the film, I remember you told me about it, and I believe it was you who sent me a trailer. That or I just
Mhm.
looked it up myself. But I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be so. I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, you know what? Actually, this isn't half bad. This isn't half bad. It had uh,
Mm.
it was mostly just talking, yes, and some people I think like that, some people don't, and some your flavor, your personal preferences. But for me, I just felt like if you're going to do a very much dialogue focused type of film, then the dialogue itself has to feel genuine,
Mhm.
and for the most part, it was. Uh, Kylie, you and I can debate that if you want, because I know you had opposite opinions about that. But
Not opposite. I'm not cutting in. I'm just standing my point. I just don't think some of the dialogue was the strongest. I loved the bits about the Lucky Charms because I do think if you're in a traumatic situation, sometimes diving into something like that is like the most reasonable thing you can do in the moment. Or the conversation Parker had about like the nerves of losing her puppy that she's been working so hard with because she doesn't think she'll make it out alive. That all I loved. I just like the lodge conversation I didn't
okay,
like
wait,
very
wait, wait.
much.
I have a working theory because I already knew there were certain parts you didn't
Mm-hmm.
like, and I have to agree that there were some parts I didn't like either. I
Okay.
think the conversations towards the beginning of the movie, where it's Joe and Dan
Mm-hmm.
talking with Parker, I felt like that wasn't very well
Uh-huh.
thought out because it's like
No, I
Dan and Joe
agree.
talking to Parker and saying like, "Oh, you should go up there, flirt with him a little bit. Here, let me just pull your jacket over a little bit so you show your bra." And it didn't make as much sense to me to like, is this what this girl's really gonna go through? Like, or I would turn away at that point. But
I mean, okay. Nick, I have gotten us to the front of a line, not because I paid, but I have the one time that you went skiing with me, I
that's
did
right.
bat my eyes
You
and get
did bat
us to
your
the
right.
front of a line.
But did you
I
show some
did do
cleavage, Kylie?
that.
Because I don't think you did.
But I no, it was like 4 degrees outside. I was bundled like the only thing that that person could see was my eyes. So I was very convincing with the lure of my eyes apparently. But I get what you're saying there. I think this film would have benefited being like if the first 15 minutes bits and pieces of that had been trimmed down, I think it could have been stronger because some of the conversations were really good, but like the dynamic between the two guys and her was just so weird. And I know he was going for that, but sometimes it didn't make
You
sense.
The theory I'm kind of just formulating right here, right now, is so I enjoyed specifically the conversations between Dan and Joe. Not only those conversations, but those are the ones where I
Hmm.
was started to notice, like, oh, this sounds like a real conversation between two bros. Okay, and that's why I think that's what no, because you were
Yeah.
just bros
Just
being
bros being
dudes. Okay, so
dudes.
so you do get it.
No, but I know what you're saying is like the dialogue written between the two guys was a lot stronger than the ways that he tried to insert Parker into the story. It felt forced rather than awkward because I think the tone they were going for was awkward, but it just felt more forced as a result,
Yes.
I think,
So
in my
okay, so we're of
opinion.
the same mind here. The Parker parts felt a little forced.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
it not that she was necessarily a bad character.
Not all of them, just like some of the stuff in the
Yeah.
beginning felt like awkward. And it's because the dialogue and chemistry between the two guys was so strong. But I will argue with you and say that Parker did end up putting on a really strong
Mm.
performance that I did enjoy. This reminded me a lot of the
Mm.
Blair Witch Project a little bit, because it's three main characters who kind of know each other but don't know each other all that well, and they're talking about nothing and everything, and then just going through a tumultuous, terrible
Mhm. Okay.
experience.
Yeah, I see the parallels there.
Except it's the natural elements versus like
Yeah, I see the parallels there.
witches.
I see what you're laying down.
So
Okay. So, yeah, the Parker scenes just I feel like Parker could have been written a little better.
yeah. It wasn't due to the lack of her acting. I think it was her dialogue directly could have been stronger. In the way that they interacted with her, those
Ooh, okay,
interactions could
so
have been
where do you
stronger.
get that from? How are you seeing that?
Like, I'm seeing it from, I'm not talking about when disaster happens. I'm talking about the buildup. Like, sure, of course, like the unzipping the jacket so she can
Mhm.
show the goods
Oh,
to
I
like
already get it.
get in
Right
on
there
the
it is.
lift and like that stuff. I was not a huge fan of, and it's not because of what was actually happening on the screen, but I think it was how it was being executed. Same with her in the lodge, and like her being like, "Oh, I just want to get my phone. Like, you guys go have fun." The end of the movie would have just been her being like, "You guys go have fun," and then being like, "Okay," and then the movie would have been over because they would have successfully have been able to have gotten down, because eventually she would have noticed that they were gone if she had stayed. But that's besides the point. Like those scenes where he's like talking about her mother and her mother trying to get a hold of her and stuff like was just kind of weird and out of place. I feel like that could have been written as something else, something like less uber personal you would share with your friend who's meeting your
Mhm.
girlfriend for the first time. You know, I think it was stuff like that. And I think generally speaking, too, there's generally a lack of character development, which makes sense because it's a survival film. The only development is that you live or
Well,
die,
they give a little bit
basically.
of
But
development through
I think
like,
that was my
short
other
snippets of like,
grief.
oh, this is how I met this character. Or hey, this is what's been going on in our lives.
It's
I know
not
it's
like,
not very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not very rewarding, but at the same time, it's again, it's reflective of real life. Like that's how you start to learn little, bits and pieces of information about someone. You hear stories from secondhand from other people.
that's true. No, I'll give you that. But we've kind of been stuck on the dialogue of this film for a bit. So I want to take a step back and talk about the things I like about this movie. I love the stakes of this movie. I'm an avid skier. I haven't skied in a couple years, but I love it. Like every time I can go to a mountain and ski, I love the stakes of it because there is a fear of like when you are on a chairlift and it stops. There is a bit of a fear there of like, oh, could I get stuck? Like, what would I have to do to get down? Um,
Yeah,
so I
I,
love
I
that.
enjoyed it too. Like
And
yeah, we were talking about one of the main critiques of this film being the characters' choices and how they handled the situation. Okay,
yes. Oh
so
my
let's blend that in a little bit.
gosh. The
So
fact that
yeah, so what were you about to say? Let's start there.
no, that was my frustrated sigh at the fact that she fell asleep with her hand on the ski lift chair handle and her hand froze to it. It was horrifying to watch, but like when you're asleep, if you're freezing, you're not just going to
Hmm.
lay your hand there. Like you're gonna tuck it into something. That was something that Joshua was actually hanging up photos in our new place, and he eventually came and sat down to be like, "This is so stupid. These people have no survival sense." He missed a lot of the movie, but he did stay for that just so he could sit and be like, "These people have zero survival sense of like what they're doing is just not smart. Like even their jackets aren't zipped up all the way. And granted, they were actually filming, as we'll talk about later, on an actual ski lift chair. We'll get into that later. But wouldn't you be cold? And
That
wouldn't you want to cover up? At least your
that is
character
all true,
probably
and
would.
honestly, I felt the same way. Where I looked at, and I think there's no reason you should have your hand on that part. I only think for like cinematic purposes, they wanted that whole like scene of watching her trying to rip off her own skin so it doesn't. Which no. At that point,
Yeah.
I would try because they didn't have any water on them. I would maybe look over at Joe and be like, "Hey, Joe, do you have to piss or
Hmm.
something?" Like, because you could piss in my hand. But think about it, the
Oh my
water.
gosh.
See, that'd be
Yeah, the water, it would be warm enough to melt
that
and
would
help
be
him melt the
strategy
hand
number one
defrost.
for
That'd be
maintaining
so gross
resources while
though.
being there. I look at everyone and say, okay, no one, no one use the bathroom. Hold it in. That that keep that pee in reserve. You never know when it's gonna be handy.
Keep that pee. We may need to drink it. I mean, didn't like in 2010 Kesha drink
I
her
have
pee?
no clue.
It can happen.
I have no
Maybe not
clue.
2010.
I know if you're going to drink your own urine, you have to purify it. So no, I wouldn't
Um,
use that for drinking. But
okay, that's
helpful
good to know.
for unfreezing stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So while the stakes were unrealistic, I think they did do a good job of, I mean, not the stakes were not, while the actions to try to survive were unrealistic, the actual stakes were fairly realistic and actually really fun as an audience member to try to picture yourself like, I don't know, how am I going to survive? Which you'll see in our RPG in 2 weeks. You'll see if Nick
Foo-foo-foo.
can survive the Frozen RPG. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure to already. But I think the cool part, like the positive feedback that I kept seeing all around about this movie was like it is really terrifying. It's terrifying to get abandoned in the snow, abandoned on a
Okay.
chairlift of all things, and be stuck under the prey of nature, under wolves attacking through like ice storms, etc. And I
Oh yeah.
honestly think I would rewatch this film. I do wonder if Parker's dog is okay. That is important to me. That's a question I did not get answered, and that's really frustrating. But I would rewatch it like in the winter, or if I wanted to psych myself out before going skiing, I would totally watch it
That's a
again.
fair topic there, which is don't be so if you're watching this film and you're now suddenly stressed out that the similar thing might happen to you. Yes, people have been abandoned on ski lifts before. Not a lot. It's very rare. But ski lifts actually have protocols in place to make sure that situations like that don't occur. They kind of hinted at it during the film. They mentioned final sweeps. You have to, if you're working
Hmm.
at a ski lift, you are required by law to do final sweeps and make sure and verify that no one is trapped there on the ski lift.
There we go. Okay. So now that your anxieties are at rest, our audiences are probably wanting to
Oh,
learn more about this film. And I think, Nick, we should start with the
okay,
writer and
okay.
director of
Good
this
old
film.
Adam Green. Kylie, what do you got? What do you got about it?
Yeah, let's dive into Adam Green. So, originally, he is from Holliston, Massachusetts, which is where Holliston Mountain got its name for the film. And he studied at Hofstra University. He started working in the commercial industry with Time Warner Cable, where he met his future business partner, Will Barat, and they co-founded Aeroscope Pictures in 1998. Fun fact, Adam Green was the lead singer of the heavy metal
Hmm.
band Haddonfield.
And not just that, he also hosted his own morning talk show for several years called Coffee and Donuts. Did you know that?
Oh my gosh. No, I did not know that. Well, even better, so the first film that they shot was a micro budget film that they
Oh,
called
okay. So that's
Coffee and
probably where the
Donuts.
inspiration came from. Okay.
Yeah. That's so cool. So, the story of how he got onto this film and how he got inspired to make this film. He was producing a film called Grace, and he saw a weather report for the day while he was in his hotel room getting ready for the day on set. And he saw a chairlift of Big Bear in the background of the weather report. And the fear that he had of it as a child of being abandoned on a chairlift kind of just came back to him, and he was like, huh, I wonder like how hard it would be to actually escape a chairlift. And in his case, what's interesting is that on the East Coast, chair lifts and ski resorts were
Hmm.
only open Friday through Sunday. So I don't think the West Coast is as much like that. I've definitely gone skiing during the week in the past, but in his case, they're only open Friday through Sunday. So you actually had the possibility of being abandoned on
So it's
a ski
interesting that
lift
you
for a
bring
whole
up
week.
that was a childhood trauma for him, only because
Hmm.
I had read somewhere that he
Yeah.
actually never set foot on a ski resort. So then again, my information comes from just looking at IMDb trivia. Anyone could have made them. So who knows whether or not that's
Okay.
true.
Well, a ski resort is different than
Mhm.
going
So
to
they might
ski
both be right,
lifts.
technically.
They could both be right. Because there are places that you can ski that have lifts that aren't like, don't have a lodge attached to it. They just have people running the lifts and maintaining the grounds. So he ended up writing the script for Frozen while Grace was going on because he wanted to get the script ready and like create something with it. And he sent it around to people, and people were not super into it, except for Peter Block. And he was like, yeah, I would love to make this movie. So he fast tracked it for him. So as they were scouting in December of 2009, they were riding the Snow Basin Mountain Resort lift. And as they were going up the lift in the cold, Green saw this beautiful spot that they were above. And he was like, this is the spot where they die. And the lift actually stopped in response without prompting. It
Oh.
just stopped randomly.
Allegedly, there was a suicide victim at the ski resort. And the only reason they found out, because apparently they didn't know. At the Sundance Festival where this movie premiered, apparently during a Q&A session, a member of the audience confessed to knowing the person who was the suicide victim at Chair 92, is what it was called.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting, very spooky and on brand.
So they're spooky. No, you're right. That is absolutely true. And it's actually initially an employee that told them the spot that they stopped above is where a skier had committed suicide. And they even saw the chair that was kept in preservation that had a bullet hole in it of
Oh,
where that person had shot themselves. So, yeah, so that's how they died. And that's just insane. So, as I mentioned, this was kind of a reflection of some of Adam Green's own fears growing up because they used to go skiing and snowboarding in Vermont. But even down to the character names, like they were very personal to him. They were named after his friends, Joe Lynch, Park O'Neill, and Dan Walker. Adam Green is noted for saying that he did do a decent amount of research and talking to other resort employees about the perils of being trapped on a ski lift. I know that was like one thing consistently the audiences weren't a fan of is like the survival skills. But let's just say we can blame those on the individual people trying to survive, not the research that Adam Green did. Because I do, I am a supporter of this film. But fun fact actually, Green is the co host of the Movie Crypt podcast with Joe Lynch. So we'll make sure to link that below if you want to hear some of the films that Joe Lynch and Adam Green talk
so
about.
I remember something you were saying, Kylie, we were both kind of talking about it at the beginning, which was
Mm-hmm.
the fact that this movie was 100% fact. No CGI, no green screens, nothing. Both love that. And I thought it was
Yes.
just, it'd be good to mention to people some interesting details, which are one, that you talked about the wolves were 100% real and they were on set for 4 days. So I could just picture like the
Yeah.
intense, like I
Mm-hmm.
would be nervous if I had to work with real wolves. I'm sure they were trained.
Yeah, they used real wolves. On the plus side, they were trained for 6 weeks in preparation for this role by Sled Reynolds, who was the lead animal trainer. He trained the wolves
Oh.
and dances with wolves. And those are
Yes.
all real wolves, with one notable exception.
What is
Do
it?
you know what the
I don't know.
notable exception is? The scene where Joe gets beat up by the wolf in front of Parker. That was actually a border collie, and the border collie beat the shit out of him probably 4 or 5 times, as you'll see in one of the behind the scene clips I have linked below for our audiences, until Joe was like, I've had enough. And they actually had a puppet do some of the really up close stuff. But generally speaking, those were real wolves.
I didn't realize for just how much like sharks, wolves. See, it makes sense when you actually like say it out loud, but in my brain never connected. Always thought, okay, so part of what draws the wolves
Yeah.
in at the first part is Dan's fall, and then all that
Hmm.
blood comes out of his legs because he had the compound fracture and everything. And the wolves were just like right on that. And I thought to myself,
Right.
I was like, are wolves like
Mm.
land sharks? And then I did some research, and then I did a big facepalm moment because I was like, oh, duh. Any animal that is considered a predator is triggered by the scent of blood. Come on. So
I don't know. I think are wolves land sharks is
wolves are
an
just
important
the sharks
question.
of the land, kind of say. Just like lions are like the sharks of the land, or owls are the sharks of the sky.
Or falcons. Actually, that's a good point. Yeah, the predators. Rare. No, one other thing I had about the wolves, though, what was interesting is that when Dan had the wolves all over him, swarming him
Right.
like they were going to kill him in the beginning, that was actually one of the trainers. And the trainer had food in their jacket to like entice the wolves and make them surround him like that, which is really a cool thing in theory, but would be
Right.
absolutely terrifying. But now that we've talked about the wolves a little bit, what were some of the other perils that our adventurers and our crew had to go through? What were
Well,
some
there
of
was the
the
fact that they were
deadly nature?
actually filming 50 feet up in the air. And what's cool on Adam Green's part was that well, I should start by saying the actual film crew were too scared to actually kind of dangle up there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly what method that they were planning to use for filming, but essentially they had to dangle fit. I
I
don't blame
don't
them
blame
either,
them though.
but it's just cool for Adam Green to be like, no, guys, you know, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. Him and the director of photography, Will Barrett, that they both had to basically just do all the
Mm-hmm.
filming themselves for that portion. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, an important thing to add for that is a lot of the filming that they did, they used a crane for a lot of it and were actually up in the air for a lot of those shots. And another cool rig that they created, but they for their creative rig, they did do some of the shots that were like head on facing our main characters where they strapped up a camera to the cable and had it stabilized up there, which is just terrifying to think about just how expensive it'd be to drop that camera. But that's besides the point. People were safe while they were doing it, which is great. Another thing that I wrote down about the actual filming of it is that they had to drive like a cat machine up a quarter of a mile up the mountain to make this happen because they were filming, like we said, literally 50 feet in the air. So to get there, you have to get a good ways up the mountain to make that happen. And I don't know if you've ever been on an active film set, or I'm not going to assume you or our audiences have, but there's a lot of shit around you. There's a lot of lights, a lot of boxes, a lot of gear just out and about, cables wrapped up. So how the crew compensated is they built platforms where they could put a lot of the gear on so that way it wasn't in the snow while they were filming. And they also ended up bringing a bunch of trees to help fill in the forest background so that way they could hide a lot of their
Like
gear
actual
behind those
trees, or are we
trees.
talking like just fake trees, like the cell towers that you see sometimes along the
Yeah,
road? Oh,
like realistic looking trees. So that way if it accidentally got caught on camera, they could be like, "Oh, it's just a tree
nothing to
there,
see here.
nothing to
Keep moving
see.
along.
Just a
Oh yeah.
tree."
Oh yeah. So, did you have any more facts, Kelly? Because I wanted to circle back to survivability because I have a couple questions. I think we're just gonna make some great things here. Did you want to touch any more?
I have like two more quick things on the making of this film. So, as we mentioned, the film is entirely practical, 24 shoot days. 19 of those were overnight shoots, which means you're living nocturnal to make this happen. They filmed at the Snow Basin Resort in Utah, as we mentioned earlier, during the coldest part of the year, specifically on a lift that was from the 70s,
Oh,
one that was rarely used. And then the last thing I had, I wasn't sure if you were curious, but how they filmed the
well, that
legs breaking,
that
the
one made me
jumping
cringe. That
off of
one
the lift
scene.
part.
I am genuinely curious. How do they do that?
So, what they did for how they filmed him jumping off specifically was they had a techno crane lowered to the ground with pants on it. And there's a camera up here.
Mm.
So imagine that these are pants. And then, as I'm waving my hand for our audiences that are on podcasts, they're not going to be able to see this part. But basically, with the crane and the camera on it and a pair of pants below the camera line, the camera was plummeted down toward the ground. So that way they could realistically show what it looked like for a pair of pants to fall down. And then uh, the other thing I thought I'd mention is that pulling focus for this film, making sure the shots were clear, was extremely difficult because they were having to deal with wind and snow and the camera moving at times. And they did say when they hired their focus puller for this film, they're like, this is
Oh
probably the
boy.
hardest part of this movie. So
Yeah, I could see
thank
how
you
that
and
would
good
be
luck.
difficult.
But yeah, that was
But I
about it
love
that
that
I had.
you kind of ended it there with the talk about how they did the pants and the camera and that whole scene of him falling. So that's gonna bring me to my first question here for you, Kylie, which is,
Mm-hmm.
would you have taken the fall
Yeah.
if you were in that same situation? Do you think you would have survived the fall?
I think okay, there's a difference between falling on snow when there's a layer of powder versus just falling on snow when there's a layer of ice. I think I would have wanted to be able to like kind of know what the ice or snow is like before I make that judgment. But even then, I don't know. Like the the dumb person in me wants to say yes, and then I would want to like dive and roll with it, like roll your body so that way if you like dislocate a shoulder, you're not breaking both of your
But
legs.
that's things like me too. I
Um
There's a part of me that would be overly confident and be like, I could do this. I could survive this fall.
yeah. Well, Joshua and I were talking about it as we were watching, and he was like, no, but like there is a possibility you could get down potentially, especially if you had your board, because you do see people in some of these crazy circumstances jump off of lifts with their board or something, and they're able to turn around
Mhm.
and get like go down the mountain. But this guy jumped without his board, which I think he would have stood a better chance of possibly jumping with his board or skis. There, I think because that would be going in line with the snow, there's a possibility that it could have picked up, or it would have just broken the board. But I don't know.
Well, so here's the thing. I did a little bit of research on that, and the simple summation of it is that there is a website that just explained it out that said, okay, if a fall is a little less than 30 feet, you have about a 75% chance of survival.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're getting to about 40 feet, now we're getting
Cool.
to about only 50% chance. They were at 50 feet. So the next level up from this research I found was 60 feet. If you're 60 feet or above, to
Mm-hmm.
quote this website, is pray for a miracle. So about 50 feet, yes, I could see like, okay, this is certainly
Okay.
by those statistics very much a dangerous situation. You do not want to take your chances. But when I watched the movie, I was like, oh, you could make that. I was like, okay, maybe that's a little bit too much. So then I started to think like, okay, here's what I would do. I would
Mm-hmm.
try as much as I could to try and decrease the distance between me and the ground. So I'd be looking at my buddy like, hey, you got a snowboard? Perfect. I
Mm.
need you to hold on to that snowboard. Hold on for dear life. I'm going to
Yeah.
slide down it, give myself maybe between my height, we're talking about my height, I'm like 5'8". The length of a snowboard.
Yeah. Oh, like hang on to the bottom bar of the seat, like of
No,
the
no, no.
chairlift, and
Even
have
even
hang
better,
or
if
hang on to the
if I
snowboard and
knew,
hang.
if I was confident the other person could hold on to their snowboard while I dangled off the other side of their snowboard,
Mm.
that could give me maybe an extra 10 feet of grace. Now we're in the 40-foot range. I got a 50-50 shot here. As long as I'm not as long as I'm not landing on my feet, which I
Yeah.
think in that situation, you had a point, which is like snow could
Uh
help
huh.
or make things worse depending on the condition of it. If you spread your body out, you should
Yeah.
that should help increase your chances too. Or you kill yourself more instantly. Who knows?
That's true.
But
Yeah, if you land like flat on your face or on your back, that would obviously not be good. But okay, so it's possible. It seems like our friends were not thinking
also I
clearly
think
when they
he was
did
a little
this.
too rash in like,
Um,
oh, it's the first night. Let me try jumping. Like, I think that's something you do maybe the next day, where when you know like you've reached the
Facts.
point of nearing deer. Yeah,
When it's light out, when you can see where you're
yeah.
dropping to, yes, good
I would
point.
give it a bit more time.
I think we would do a decent job surviving. No, okay, now that you've brought that up, I'm going to have to modify parts of the RPG to make it more challenging for you for the possible tactics that
Uh,
you may try. You know, it'll be lots, it'll be very fun. But Nick, I wanted to circle
oh
back
yes.
real quick to the actors. There were three people who made this film,
Hmm.
3 stars of the film. They put a lot into this. And Adam Green was super clear in the early casting process that he wanted actors who had talent
Mm.
over names in this film. And ironically, Emma Bell is the first person who walked through his door. And he was like, "Cool, we got it. She's hired." And the rest of his team was like, "Okay, you really should wait and see everybody else." But even after they saw everybody else, he was hooked on having Emma
Okay.
Bell play
Do you know what
Parker.
specifically drew? Like
Um,
you said, talent. What was it that she did for her audition?
I think based on the interviews I saw, it was just the way that she understood the stakes and the very human condition of the script, like the survival story. I think another important thing to mention about the actors who auditioned and the actors who got hired, these actors were told in the audition room that they were going to be in the elements for filming. And because of that, about 70% of the actors dropped
Mm.
out because of that. They could not handle the idea of being in the snow for a month and filming up there. So I think that's important to notice too, because it did change some of the probably people who would have come in. And I think who they ended up
Typical
picking was
Hollywood.
fantastic. But these were the
Always
people who are willing to
typical
be in the
Hollywood.
elements.
Always.
Okay. Okay. I live in LA now, so I don't appreciate that as much anymore. But a couple more other small things. The girl Shannon, who Sean Ashmore's character Joe was after, Shannon was played by Adam Green's then wife, Riley Vanderbilt. Even Adam Green and Joe Lynch, they make cameo appearances as the pissed off skiers, and a lot of the crew made cameo appearances. They kind of filled in the background of the movie, which I thought was cool. And then the last thing I
You
had,
just get to like, oh yeah, we'll insert you here in the background. But finally,
I think so. These were also characters who just didn't have like many lines. So I think because this was a project that was so personal to him, I think he just wanted to have people he
yeah,
enjoyed being with involved.
yeah. I'm
If I
just saying
had
that's
to
like a
guess,
that's
I
like
mean,
just
that'd be
an
a great
extra
question to
benefit of
ask him.
just working on small projects like this. I can imagine it's a higher chance of like, oh, you can get your 10 seconds on camera. Hopefully, you survive the cutting room floor.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last thing that I had about the actors was that Kevin Zegers, who played Dan, he was actually a friend of Adam Green's. And he was a really well established actor. And Kevin was the one who suggested bringing in Sean Ashmore, who played Joe, because they were friends. And once they did the chemistry read, it was clear that Sean Ashmore was meant to be the Joe to
Because
Kevin
of his
Zegers'
experience with
Dan.
ice-based people,
So
right?
they were besties in real life. Exactly. That is, I think you need to dive into that further, though, for those of us
Yes.
who
Okay.
don't
So,
know what you're
for
talking
any of
about.
the comic book nerds out there, or comic book movie nerds more specifically, what kind of drew me like one of the first things I noticed about this film I was watching the trailer was Sean Ashmore's presence. Reason being that he was in the first set of X-Men films uh, as Iceman, Bobby Drake. So he actually had the powers of like making ice appear out of nowhere, blasting it out of his hands. I mean, honestly, I'm shocked he didn't use those powers here in this film. He should have he should have survived.
It would have
Yeah,
been really helpful if he
but
did.
yeah, no, just interesting guy all around, talented actor. You're talking about like talent over name. I don't think he's a very well known actor, but certainly lots of talent. Uh, an- Another interesting thing about him is he has a
Hmm.
twin brother, Aaron Ashmore, and they actually what's funny about those two working, both being actors, they actually were on the same TV show at different times as different characters.
What show?
Yes.
What?
So anyone who's a fan of Smallville TV series out there, Sean was on the show first for one episode. He played a character. He was like a villain of the week, basically, in the first season. He was on the show in the first
That's
season,
cool.
and then his brother Aaron then got a much larger role. He lasted maybe 2 seasons, I want to say, 2 or 3 seasons on the show. And it's just funny to
Wow.
think that like there's twin brothers that look so much alike, and they're playing different characters. No one ever stops in the show to even think for a second, like, you look a lot like this person.
The talent over name, I guess. They were like, yeah, this may mess with our show Bible and how these characters are supposed to appear, but you're
Hmm.
talented enough, so it's
Sean
worth
also
it.
stars in a great TV show that Kai and I watched this year called The Rookie with Nathan Fillion. If anyone hasn't seen that, definitely give it a watch. And Sean Ashmore's in it. He's great. Uh, again, talented actor. That's pretty much all I have. But I guess I do have one other question for you, if you want to take the time to maybe pull this apart. I was a little
Yeah.
confused by the ending. You know, I'm not sure if anyone else was. It seemed like it was a topic of debate. Did Sean Ashmore's character Joe, did he die at the end of the film? Was that because I know towards the end, we have Parker going down, and she sees a carcass being pulled apart by wolves. And I
Hmm.
kind of like had to stop and think about it for a second because maybe I was just missing some details at the time. I was like, is that supposed to be Dan or is that supposed to be Joe? Because it could be,
I
because that's the thing
think.
is like we see Joe like ski off or snowboard off trying to run away from the wolves, and I could believe him dying, but I just don't kind of want.
Mhm.
I don't really want to. I want to believe that he survived, and I want to just think like, oh, is that
Mhm.
Dan? And maybe his body was pulled a little bit down by the wolves. Because that's the other thing. I was like, it can't be Dan because he would have been farther up, right underneath the chairlift.
Would you rather believe that it was Joe and he abandoned Parker, that Joe survived and he abandoned Parker, or would you rather believe that that's
I don't
Joe's
want to think that
carcass?
Joe abandoned Parker. I don't think he was. There's no way he was abandoning Parker.
I think that's Joe's carcass then. I think that's why further down the hill, I think there are subtle indicators, maybe by the color of like whatever sleeve she sees or something.
Did
I
we
think that's Joe. The macabre macaroni spaghetti mess of what was once a
did we
human
see if
being.
the carcass had a snowboard or skis? Because he
Pretty
makes a
sure.
point has an argument with Dan at the beginning where he's like, "You'll never see
That
me on a snowboard." So if he had skis, as probably Joe.
but he snowboarded down the
That
mountain, did he
we'll
not?
have to rewatch the film to decide for ourselves.
But yes, let us know in the comments if you think that was Joe or Dan. And before we wrap up this episode, Nick, do you think you could survive this movie? I think that's a question we have to start asking at the end of every deep dive before we do the RPGs, so that way we can know, like, do we actually think we can survive this movie as
I
human
I
beings?
think I could for sure. I would say we could, but that's not the
Okay.
spirit of this question. I think I
Thanks.
could. Um, Definitely with depending on how high we're up, I would definitely consider that one strategy I told you about with the
Hmm.
snowboard and trying to decrease the amount of distance between me and the ground. I also, I mean, I would have probably just tried first with the cables too, kind of what Joe was doing, but I would not have known about those cables being razor sharp.
Yeah.
Apparently, I wouldn't guess that. So I'd probably first get stung a little bit. But then after I knew
Yeah.
that, I'd probably be like, okay, guys, I
Mm.
can get down there in like less than an hour, but I'm gonna need to borrow some clothes to layer up. So I would
Yeah.
be trying to like protect my hands as best as I can. Just to add some extra cushion while I
Yeah,
I
that
certainly
makes
believe
sense.
I could hold myself up and go scale that cable across the chairs.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think you would survive based on that, whether it was you trying to do the cable or lower yourself down. I think similar to you, probably my first instinct would be to try to use ski poles or a snowboard or a jacket like rope to lower one of us down and then ski down the mountain and find help.
See, but the jacket rope would be
And
difficult because, again, those cables are apparently razor sharp.
no, not for the cables, for
Oh,
lowering off the
okay.
chairlift, for
Yeah,
just
like,
going to
have
the
people
ground.
climb down each
Not for
other,
that. No, I
form a human ladder.
not each other. No, like not a human ladder. But yeah, like hypothetically, if you could lower a ski pole and have one person hang off of it, or you could lower a like multiple jackets of people for 10 minutes took off their jackets to like lower one person down and then they bundled back up and huddled together, I think they would be alive long enough for help to come. Given that's, but I also, similar to you, would try to fight the urge to not jump off the lift right away, given that it's dark. I wouldn't want to jump without like some sort of light because those mountains can get kind of
Mhm.
scary in the dark when you're trying to
Oh yeah, I imagine
navigate.
it'd be a real pain trying to ski or snowboard down when there's no lights. Like we know those are turned off. I think the human ladder or trying to scale down each other could essentially work out. You'd have to have the person at the top with the strong grip strength, holding on for dear life. But as soon as you get someone to the
Well,
bottom, you just have to
I
catch the
think
next
we
guy, and
also,
it's good. You're good to go.
yeah, that's not bad at all. Well, I think also you have to take into account the personal abilities and comfort abilities with skiing and snowboarding. So if you were stuck on the chairlift with me, I would probably want somebody else who is more comfortable on skis and a snowboard in addition, because I know that skiing is not
That's fine. I'm
necessarily
gonna get
your
down the
favorite
mountain anyway. If
activity.
you even have to walk there, it'll be fine. I would.
But then you'd get eaten by wolves. Did
Kylie,
you
the
learn
wolves only
nothing from
came
this
because they
movie?
shed blood. Okay, as long as we don't bleed, we'll be fine.
Mm,
That's why another reason why wolves are like
okay.
sharks.
Well, I guess we're
Wolves are
cocky
like
and
sharks. They don't
confident.
attack you if there's no blood.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we're cocky and confident that we would survive this movie. I think paired with my good skiing abilities and your logic abilities and the fact that you're an Eagle Scout as
Mhm.
well would be definitely helpful. But we'll have to see if you can actually survive in the RPG that we have coming up with a couple of special guests who you guys have not met yet. So we will have two new guest agents in our next RPG episode. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive episode of this 2010 thriller, Frozen. Not Disney's Frozen. We're not gonna let it go. But make sure to stay tuned in 2 weeks for the RPG episode to see if Nick, with all of his confidence and gusto he had in the deep dive episode, if he can survive this crit. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe.
Don't
Bye,
worry, everyone. I
everybody.
got this. Easy peasy.